welcome back to this week's episode of the Marketing Women podcast. Today we have Nomiki Petrolla on the podcast. She's the founder of PDS Labs, a tech accelerator helping women turn their ideas into real products. She's worked with startups at all stages, helping them go from concept to launch. Today, she also launched Thiana, so very excited about that. But in this episode, we're talking about how to validate an idea before you waste time and money, and how non-technical founders can build an MVP, and why data is your best friend in product development. So I'm very excited about this one. I hope you learn a lot from this. And if you've ever wondered, where do I even start? Right here. This episode is for you. Hi, Nomiki. Thank you for being on the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Anusha. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I loved listening to your presentation at Harvard, and I was like, I need to have her on the podcast.
I so appreciate that. It was so fun to do.
I know. I was thinking we could talk about how to kind of take something from an idea to MVP. And let's say that someone doesn't have a tech background. How can they kind of get started? So maybe we start talking about how does data-driven product development actually work? What does it mean for someone that's just getting started?
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So Let me give you some context. The majority of women that I work with at PDS Lab, that's my tech accelerator for women, they don't have a technical background. And what I mean by that is that they have not been immersed in a technical position at a tech startup, essentially, or they're not an engineer. But mostly it means that they don't have a product background. And product people don't necessarily have to be engineers. There's all walks of life. A product person is basically a mini CEO of the product, and they help make decisions based on marketing and sales and product and all the things, QA, customers. It's their job to take all of that feedback, to analyze the data, synthesize it, and then put something out into the ether to serve a customer. So at the lab, what we do is really focus on that validation. So the first piece of data that we talk about, and I'm data heavy, I follow the 80-20 rule in our system. 80 meaning, what's the data telling us from our target audience, what they're building, what their customers are saying about a problem statement specifically. And then 20%, what is the magic that you have to bring to that product? Because that's actually what makes businesses really special, is what the founder brings in, what they can see that other people can't see, what their gut says about, what a business could be, what the landscape is about to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. They can see things that other people cannot, or the data can't synthesize to tell you to do. So in that process, we use data from our customers, our potential audience that might be using our solution that solves a very specific problem. We're doing that by gathering qualitative feedback, so conversations, just talking to people, understanding their pain points, their experiences, what they've done that failed, how they make decisions, and all that data to affirm basically what the problem statement is, to say, hey, did what we assume was the problem actually the problem that we should be solving? And once the data comes up pretty quickly in conversations, because you learn how to pull back the onion and ask more questions about what the problem is, what a specific persona did, to figure out how to solve it themselves without a solution. And then once that data starts to appear, we get the signal to say, okay, let's affirm that data. So everyone loves to lean into survey data first. I do not follow that. They do it because it's easy, right? All you have to do is put up a Google form or a type form. You add a bunch of questions and you're like, super easy. Let me send it out to 100 people. And then I got my data. I hate doing that. I think that you can gather better insights, more quality insights from conversations. And it's a practice. You have to learn how to have conversations, how to communicate, how to be a good listener, how to understand, to be empathetic, and to understand their visual cues and how they're feeling about a pain point that they've discussed with you. That is a whole skill set. So the quantitative data, after we've identified those things, I use it to affirm, basically double down on what you just learned. And when we do that, we can then add numbers to it. Okay, let's measure the pain. Now that they've told us this X, Y, and Z is the pain point, let's measure it on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, how much have they spent in the past to solve that problem? Where did they go? And why did it work or did not work? And then we try to say, okay, with all that information, both qualitative and quantitative, does it align? Did we say, okay, this is a pain point I should be following? And then we go down this rabbit hole of what is the solution? And 9 times out of 10, the data will tell you a solution that does not map to what you thought the solution was. And that happens because people don't lean into validating problems. They validate ideas. And that's not how you want to do it. You want to validate the problems first. So I gave you a lot of information there.
No, that was great. I think I agree with you there. Validating problems, not validating ideas. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We were talking about data, how it's like 80-20, data is more important. Can you talk about why data principles are so important, even if you're not, let's say you don't really know a lot about data, if you're not technical?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, everything that you're doing is data driven. Every conversation you have is full of data. It's just a matter of changing your mind to see it that way. So a lot of people say, I don't have the data. But really they do. They've been having conversations. They've been talking about things. It gave them an idea, right? The data already gave you something. It's just a matter of mapping it the right way. So in using that data, shifting your mindset to say, well, what have I actually learned over time? Now let's affirm that data that we've learned. Let's actually put it on paper, not just keeping it in our heads. Because how many times do we say, oh, I've talked to so many people, but those so many people is actually like 3. Okay, let's talk to 20. Let's talk to 30. Let's actually see if there's a pattern here. So everything that you're doing is data driven. It's just a matter of using it the right way and understanding that data can be anything. It can be timing. It can be those conversations. It can be those pain points. It can be anything in your day-to-day life that you're gathering. You're just looking at it differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, even if you don't think you have data, you actually do. It's just about recognizing patterns and structuring them the right way. That's something a lot of people overlook, even when they're starting out. And that reminds me, I remember when we were at your presentation, you were talking about how to use data, which is like you have an idea and you talked about how we get data and then we build an MVP. Can you talk about how if there's a founder who's not technical, who doesn't understand data, how can they actually implement that?
Yeah.
How does the process look?
Everyone I talk to is non-technical. So it's really a matter of teaching them the foundation of what it looks like to have quality conversations. So in the Harvard presentation, I recommended the book, The Mom Test. I actually require everyone that goes through my program to read that book. I read it myself once a month. It's really important. I love the book because it basically tells you how to reframe your conversations to gather quality data. So whether you're technical or non-technical, it doesn't actually matter. Just because you're technical doesn't mean that you're gathering good data. It really is about how are you talking to people? Are you asking the right questions to glean the insights you need to take action? And understanding when the data is telling you that's not something you should be focusing on. So The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick is a book I recommend to everyone. And I mentioned in the lab, you're required to read it to go through the process. It basically says to use the mom test, literally. When you go to your parents, you go to your friends and your family, and you're like, I've been thinking about building this idea. And they're all going to say, that's great. Go do it. Why not? Why not try to do that? And you, in your mind, you're like, oh, I got the signal. I got the signal that that's a good idea. The problem is they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to tell you, oh, that might suck, right? They also don't know what problem you're trying to solve. You're just talking about what you want to achieve. So it's actually shifting your whole mindset and how you communicate what you're trying to do without ever saying the idea. Because ultimately what happens is that data tells you it's probably not the right thing, or there's 100 other ways that you can build it. What's the right way for you? So in terms of being non-technical, it doesn't actually matter. It's about having good conversation, knowing when to interject in conversation, when to ask the right questions. And it doesn't matter if you're technical or not. It's really about those conversations and leaning into the listening that you're gathering from those people.
That makes sense. So before we even think about MVP, the first step is to make sure the problem actually exists. That's where the mom test helps. And then like getting real honest feedback before even building anything. But once you've validated that, if someone is non-technical and wants to build an MVP, could you give some examples of what that might actually look like?
So it actually changes. So when we're talking about gathering data, the first conversation is about not talking about the idea. You typically do not have a product or an MVP. You don't have anything. You're just validating that the problem exists so that you can come up with ideas. That's the hardest part because a lot of people love to go straight into building and they want to have something tangible that they can share and get user feedback on. Once you start to glean into those insights and it tells you build this MVP, this is what you should be building, the proof of concept essentially. that data that you gather with that is different, right? So now you're saying, okay, I've validated the problem. I've come up with the idea. I built this MVP. I want to test it. Let's go down to another piece of round of feedback from these people now to say, how do you feel about this experience? Asking them questions like, can you get from here to here? And observing them, seeing them use their tool, watching their visual cues of, was that challenging? Did their mouse move in a bunch of places when they should have clicked there? Why didn't they do that? Was it language? Was it the button choice of words? Was it where things were placed? Was it not what they expected? You have to be able to observe and see the nonverbal cues of what's working, what's not working. So it's different line of feedback that you're gathering. But what you'll find in this evolution of feedback is that every week I tell people, don't ever stop having conversations. Every week you should be having conversations with minimum 2 to 3 people to gather those insights, because things will change. Technology evolves, people evolve, timing evolves, the seasonality, everything matters. So keep gathering that feedback to help the evolution of your product and listen to them. Gather enough that you can say, oh, I have conviction. I should update this piece, or I should add this next feature, et cetera, et cetera.
So just to make sure I'm getting this right. So it's like, first you have an idea and then you talk to people, you validate that, and then you build MVP, and then you again see how it's working, what's not working, reiterate, and then work on it again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's this constant build, ship, iterate, repeat process.
Right. So for all of these, we need problem solving over tech expertise. It doesn't matter if you're not technical, but you still need to be someone that solves good problems. Mm-hmm. What are some problem solving skills that early founders can rely on, and especially when they don't have tech expertise?
Yeah. Problem solving is a skill that you learn over time. I think experience really helps in that, and seeing things from other people that have built businesses and how they, made decisions under pressure, or what they listened to or didn't listen to, and what the customers or data was telling you. I really think problem solving comes from really good listening skills. Not focusing on what you want to get out of something, but listening to your customers, being able to do that at mass and dissect that information to say, this is really what I'm seeing. How can I build something to solve for that? And a lot of times it's not right in front of you. The data is not going to tell you exactly what to do. It's your job to figure out, to be creative, to be able to synthesize and say, okay, if this problem is, I'm trying to come up with an example. If they came up with a problem and you're like, oh, this problem is persistent across every single person, it doesn't mean that doing the direct thing is the solution, right? So there's tangential elements that you need to be thinking about, because that linear effect is not always true. You have to be thinking about, well, how did they get to this problem? What happened before? What happened after? And what can I do to solve for that problem, but also thinking about the future, the past, how it's going to impact their next element, and all these different things. That is a skill. And you have to learn over time how to synthesize data, to look at it, to glean insights, to actually do that. So I'll say listening is definitely the first thing, but the second one is maturity, honestly, and seeing it, experience, failing a bunch of times, and then realizing, oh, it didn't work because I didn't consider that. Now I need to take in all these other facets to make that decision and get better over time. It's a learned skill for sure.
Yeah, I mean, from your experience talking to founders, you might have, and you've also mentioned that you work with non-technical founders. How do they take that data and actually make sense of it? Everyone talks about getting data and then you put it in an Excel sheet or something and then you try to visualize it. But how do you actually understand what it's saying if you have no experience at all?
So what I like to do as a simple practice is document all your conversations, and then I pull out the highlights from each conversation. What were the 1 or 2 things that stood out the most in every conversation? And what you'll find over time, there's a pattern. You'll see that the high level feedback, or the high value feedback rather, is consistent across the board. So once you see that feedback, then we look at, okay, what are the high, medium, and low pieces of valued feedback that we gathered from 100 conversations? What's consistent? We can use AI to help you organize all that information, but it's your job to say, okay, if this is the feedback, what does that actually mean? So we go down, it's really working together and understanding how they got to that feedback, or what does that mean for what they're trying to achieve in the software. There's no one size fits all, but it's really about sitting there and trying to get the correlation between data, what's causing that data to happen, and then using it to make a decision. Your decision isn't always right? You have conviction, you think you know, but you really will never know until you put it in front of them and you see what's happening, and then you kind of evolve. That's why I always say, like, we're failing every single day. It's really just tests. We're constantly putting out a test and what we're learning to see if that's true. It's a hypothesis, just like I did at the lab. Like, our job is to figure out, this is what I think is the problem. Let me go and solve it to see. The first thing I did at the lab was I built a course. I'm not a course instructor. I mean, I do actually teach at university now, but before that I was not. And I was like, oh, let me record all these things. And what I learned was that people, I thought they wanted the knowledge, but they didn't want it in that way. They wanted one-on-one support. So that was a learning for me, because I was like, oh, this is easy. I'll put all of my knowledge into this course that they can take over a week, and they can build their own MVP for an inexpensive cost, and they can go do all the things. It failed because I realized, oh, they want that knowledge, but they want me to teach it to them, hold them accountable. They want me to show them every step of the process. So I had to evolve. So it's really those tests that we're pushing out into the ether constantly to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, thinking about it, if I did not have the technical background that I do, I would probably sometimes feel like all of these things sound too intimidating for me to even like take into account.
So I might think I need someone as a technical co-founder.
So do you think that's a misconception that people have, or is that something that's required? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I definitely do. So the data supports that if you have a technical co-founder, your chances of getting funding are much higher. It supports that if you have someone technical on your side, that you're going to reach a certain amount of revenue each year over time. The data supports it. And so I don't deny that that's what you should be doing over time. However, at the idea stage, I really believe that as a non-technical person, you need to push yourself to a friction point of learning as much as you possibly can about what it means to build products, so that when you do bring someone on, and that time will be very clear, you'll hit a point where you're like, I don't know what the F I'm doing, I need help. When you hit that point, then it's saying, okay, I've learned as much as I can. I now can have an educational discussion. I know what I'm talking about. I'm informed. I can at least have a fruitful conversation with someone that is technical to ask them the right questions, because I've learned enough that got me to that point. And you're not just handing over your IP, handing over your ideas and letting them run with it. It's supposed to be a collaboration, right? You need to be thought partners and being able to solve problems together from the technical and the non-technical side. The beauty about non-technical founders is that they are really good at a lot of other things. It's superpowers, really, that technical people may not have, right? The MO of technical people they're introverts, right? They don't like to have conversations. They like to build. They like to be behind the scenes. But the non-technical people, they're the face. They're really good at those things. So when you marry the two and you marry them at the right time, oh my gosh, magic actually happens. So I want to push founders that are non-technical to that point so that they can get as much education as possible to basically set them up for success.
Right. So it is actually possible for a founder to just test ideas and get to that stage, and then bam, you know that you need someone like that.
There's so many tools out there now that anyone can build anything. The generation that we're in of software evolution is crazy. It'd be silly for anyone not to take advantage of the tools that are out there just to test any business, whether it be software or not.
It's cool that you talk about that, because that was going to be my next question. How can someone that is not technically savvy, do they invest in technology too much? Or is there like, you should do this much and not more than that, and then maybe hire someone or get a co-founder at this point?
Well, there's a facade, right? People, and this is starting to change over education over time. And last year I've seen a lot of evolution here, but the facade is that people think that they have to go fundraise as non-technical people to go hire a team or dilute themselves to a co-founder to build the thing for them. I just talked to a founder yesterday who spent almost $200,000 and they don't even have a prototype yet. And it's because they were non-technical. They thought that was the norm. It's not the norm. I was like, you're getting taken for a ride, get legal involved at this point. Like, that's not what should be happening. And you have the skills to get further ahead than what they're doing for you. So I think more of the people are educating on you don't need to do that. Of course, there's always the exception to the rule, right? You're building a customized AI thing. You have experience with it. You have high conviction. You might have some cash. I'm going to go spend it on a data engineer and they're going to help me build this thing, blah, blah, blah. They spend $100,000. Those are the anomalies, but it does happen because of their experience. They have the background, the knowledge, they have the resources, the network, etc. That's not the story for everyone. Those are complete anomalies. So I think over time, we're going to see more education for, hey, if you're non-technical, do not go to the agency right away. You're not ready for that. Test something out before you spend money. Be cash efficient. Think about your dollars. Don't spend money when you want to use that to get more customers on your marketing. Like there's so many tools out there that you can do it for free. Like Bubble is like $50 a month. It's nuts.
It's great that you mentioned that. Are there any other low cost but data driven tools that you would recommend?
Yeah. Bubble's my favorite just because it's easy to use. They also integrate with Figma, so you can just like import your designs and move forward. Flutterflow is another one. Softer is an internal tool. Retool is another internal software tool. Webflow is a website. I like it. I use it for my businesses. Zapier will connect anything. Like, so no matter what your tool is, Zapier, Make, or IFT. I just sent an article this morning on different tools that you could be using to be more efficient. That was one of them. All these different tools are available at like literally sub $50 a month.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to ask you for that link later and then I'll attach it to the description. Yeah. I want to talk about something that is very, very talked about in the industry, which is it's very male dominated. And I know that you work with a lot of women. So a lot of women feel excluded in tech. How do you approach accessibility in this?
Yeah. So it's weird because my whole history has been working with men primarily, all male founders. One of them was a male and female married couple that ran businesses, but the guy was the one that was the engineer by trade. So he was building the product. She was the face, marketing, sales, etc. She was exceptional at that. But all the people I worked with were men that were like, hey, can you help me build this thing? So I was like completely blindsided when I realized, oh, I was in a tunnel of not seeing what was happening systemically. I didn't realize that I was an anomaly. I did not know that until I left my job and said, shit, like this is actually a problem. So I also have 4 brothers. I work really well with men. I think it's just like my natural instinct to communicate with them easier and whatnot. No bullshit. You know, my brothers beat my ass growing up. So I just had to...
Don't relate.
Yeah. I just had to stick up for myself in all the ways. So I had no problem being the only woman in a room. But what I realized when I started to work with more women is that they've been jaded. They might have bad experiences, or they're fearful of being in those rooms and they're afraid of sticking up for themselves or standing out. And half the stuff I teach is really mindset. I'm like, you need to step into your own. It's time for you to become confident in who you are, because it doesn't actually matter. And the only way we're going to change is if we change. We have to also evolve. We have to allow them in, or we have to say, you're full of shit. I don't want anything to do with you. I'm going to keep focused and do my thing. So I don't think it's men versus women by any means. And that over time, it's going to shift a little bit. But I do think as women, I try to coach them to be like, just be brave, be confident in who you are. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about the naysayers. Like, who gives a shit? Like, there's always going to be someone doubting you, no matter what. And if it's men, but whatever, let them do their own thing over there. You focus on you. So there's a lot of mindset coaching at the lab, accountability mindset, growth, and really leaning into who you are as a person and what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, I also think when women, especially if they are non-technical, it's like, oh, and add on stuff to that, like to feel intimidated. What advice would you have for them?
Well, the thing about them is that they have so many skills that the technical males do not have. So lean into your superpower. Like, you have to say, this is what I'm really good at. It might not be tech, but I'm going to build a problem. I'm going to build a solution because I'm really good at this and I know the problem. No one can take that away from you. So you need to lean into that as much as you possibly can. Lean into your superpower. You know what you're great at. Focus on that. And don't even worry about the tech, because tech can be built by anyone. You don't actually have to be an expert there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. Let's say that someone's starting from the scratch, and if there's one thing that you think they should remember in building a product that's very data driven, what would it be?
So no one knows what the F they're doing. Literally no one does. So when you're like, I don't know what I don't know, I'm like, no one does. So don't feel like someone has more answers than you in the same stage as you are, because they don't know either. And everyone started from zero. Even people that are making billions of dollars, they started from nothing. So we have to start at zero and be okay with that and just say, well, if they can do it, I can do it. have that no, I don't give a shit attitude and just go. So that's what I would tell them. Like, you're not by yourself in a silo of not knowing. No one knows what they're doing at first. It's just a matter of figuring out faster than someone else and taking action.
Awesome. I love that. I want to give you some space to talk about PDS Labs and what you guys do.
Yeah. So really what we do is everything that we just talked about. I support women that have ideas that have not been able to bring it to life. I teach them the fundamentals of product development. So I really want to fix the cracks in the concrete through both of my companies. And it's really about the fundamentals, the building blocks of product, the building blocks of building a business from scratch. You know, this is Thayana is now my 5th business. PDS was my 4th. So I've been around the block a few times and learning how to do it from scratch and getting better every time. And what I want to teach them is how to do that, how to be scrappy, how to be resourceful, how to make decisions, how to lean into the data, how to actually move your own needle, because most of the time, you're the one stopping yourself. So at the lab, I teach them how to do that. I hold them accountable. I give them the resources and we build product. I teach them how to do all those things in a 6-month program. It's been awesome. I've had some amazing women that have gone through lots of cool launches, which is neat. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. I love that. Anyone who's interested, go check it out.
Thanch you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Anusha.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask you?
We're launching Thayana, which is the tech platform from 0 to a million in ARR for female tech founders exclusively in February. So get on the early access list and I'd love to support you.
Love that. Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you, Anusha. I so appreciate you.
Of course.